can you tell me a bit about you and your family?
So we've been married for 15 years. We have two children, 9 and 11. And well, my 11-year-old's not quite 11. He'll be 11 in 2 weeks, but he's already 11 in my mind. But one is verbal, one is nonverbal. My youngest one is nonverbal, but he's not entirely nonverbal because he does say things, but there's no functional, a lot of times it lacks function. So a lot of it is echolalia. He watches a lot of videos on YouTube, and he tends to fixate on a particular segment of a video. And then a lot of times in the situations of high anxiety, he will cycle. Like for example, like he has a video where he watches, he has a special interest in alphabet and anything related with alphabet. And so he has quite a large vocabulary when it comes to letter and word association. And so a lot of times he surprises us with what he comes up with. Like you can give him a letter, let's say Z, and then he'll come up with zucchini. And not always it is an obvious choice. A lot of people go with the zero or something else, or zoo. Zoo is quite often the common one, but so he's very recent. One is Z for zoo. He keeps saying Z for zoo, Z for zoo, and it just goes on. It could go on for some time until situation changes and he's more comfortable, and then he switches to something else.
Gotcha.
We find that it's a lot of people don't understand, especially when we are in public, and then he starts doing that, especially like in the restaurants or a place where people can hear this. They don't always understand it. We find that it's amusing. Sometimes my wife feels self-conscious, and she kind of she gets a little bit uneasy about this, about other people reacting on him, and sometimes he will burst out very high volume, like we're sitting in the restaurant and it's called Zimazu, and the whole restaurant turns around like, what is going on? Why is he yelling? So sometimes it's just but I guess the volume has something to do with his sensory needs. He just gets overwhelmed and he'll say it. So yeah. My wife is Colombian, I'm Russian. I was born and spent the first part of my life in Soviet Union. Then in '96, at the age of 97, at the age of 16, I moved here. And I've been here ever since. Spent the last 20 years in Florida. And that's where I met my wife and had two children, and now we're here having this interview.
How well do you feel you understand your non-speaking child, and do you feel that that's influenced by you also being autistic?
Yes, and it's very influenced by me being autistic. I feel that a parent understands their child the best because I share some of my genes with him, and a lot of times, because we're of the same gender, I can see a lot of myself in him. So a lot of times, my understanding of him is very it's almost like I ask myself, like, how would I feel in this situation? And a lot of times I can kind of project it onto him, and a lot of times it works out. Yes, and being autistic also helps me be more acceptable of his behaviors. To say even more, when we first started looking into autism, because I always knew that I was different, but I didn't know why or how, or I always, and I sometimes felt that maybe it's not me, maybe like I just couldn't figure it out. And when we started, when we had my youngest, we started kind of seeing something off. And so that kind of started my journey into looking into it. And then I went on a journey to figure it all out. And I got so into it that I ended up getting a degree in the university in psychology.
Wow.
I just graduated
Well,
like
congratulations.
a few months ago. Yeah, I just got my diploma. I specialized in behavioral analysis because I wanted to make sure that behavioral analysis, because it was suggested by everybody, and I wanted, before I subjected him to this, I wanted to understand what it is, how it works, and how it is implemented. And maybe fortunate for him that he has never had any ABA. As I was learning, I realized that it's not for us. It's not something I want him to endure. And I watched your video about ABA, and I've watched a number of other videos about ABA from a number of creators. But the the ABA as it is in my view, it can be useful, but it's not being used appropriately. I feel that because the system is not, how to say it, incentivized to be beneficial. It is incentivized to be less than effective, because they benefit from prolonging the having the child in the system. The longer the child stays in the system, the more beneficial it is to the system. And I, through my studies, I got to the understanding that it's not the system, it's not the ABA that's wrong, it's how it's being used that's wrong. And I feel that the ABA shouldn't be the child shouldn't be subjected to ABA. It is the parents that need to receive the training and understand how it works so they can be more effective parents. And I feel that that would be more effective, but it would not be very beneficial to the industry as it is. If it was redirected towards parents, it would be just like basically an RBT course for parents, and then they would take in the benefits of it, of the system, because parenting, in my view, is founded on ABA. It's just the intensity is much lower, and a lot of parents don't understand they're doing it. And so, like, understanding all the aspects of ABA could benefit the parents quite a lot, because caring for a child that has special needs, it requires more effort and more understanding, and just be better equipped. And I feel like that would be the better usage, but unfortunately, that's not how it is.
How would you describe your place in the autism community, given that you're both a parent of an autistic child and an autistic adult?
I thought about this question a lot, and I don't. I feel like it's an autistic thing. Yeah, we try not to fit into a particular mold. We're not trying to find a place. I feel like we kind of on our own a lot of times, and it's how we like it, because being in a particular place, being in a particular position, it's very stressful. It constrains you. It makes you kind of like, okay, I have to say it this way, I have to be this way, but this is my spot, this is how I respond to things. And this is just goes against my nature. It's just I don't really feel that I have to be in a particular place in the autistic community. I feel like it's just a lot of the autistics kind of have their own views, and they have their own personal view on things, and they express it. And some autistics agree, some disagree. It's a very diverse community, and there's no unified way that this is how autistic people say or do things or respond to things. I don't think everybody, like a lot of us, disagree with each other. And I feel like it's just because of our nature. It's just we're not that way. We're not built that way.
Do you feel as though you are your child's voice, and why or why not?
I feel like being the voice of your child is something that you are required to do early on. but I feel in order to get the development of the child correct, you have to be less and less of a voice. You have to allow the child to have their own voice, because if you always speak for him, if you always do things for him, it creates dependence. And I feel that I need to scale back as he gets older. I need to become more of a support role rather than an active role to speak for him, because I feel like if I'm speaking for him all the time, he will not have the motivation to speak for himself. He'll just say, "Well, my dad's gonna solve this, solve that." He'll talk to whoever needs to talk, and he won't have the motivation. I'm trying to. I still have uh, the hope that he's going to gain the communication, and I want him to have the motivation to do so, because I feel like he has what it takes. He's just not motivated, and if I speak for him, I feel like it takes away from the motivation. So he needs to, and that's not only speaking for him, it's also like we try to give him more and more independence, more and more autonomy, so that I try not to just run around after him, giving him whatever he needs whenever he needs it right away. I want him to ask me. I want him to go grab it. I want him to fail. Maybe something falls and breaks, and it's okay, because he learns by doing. And if I'm doing it for him, he's not learning. So I need him to I'm not expecting to be always there side by side with him and speaking for him and helping him and holding his hand the entire time. I'm expecting to slowly that he would develop his own things, and he's going to be his own person and speak for himself. And he does it quite effectively. He doesn't speak, but a lot of the body language and the minimal verbal that he has, it gives him enough. But I feel like as he grows older, it's going to be less and less enough, and he's going to have to find in him something to get him to the next level. And that's what I'm trying to get him naturally to want to communicate, to want to have the motivation to move forward. And so as of right now, I'm trying to already scale back and just watching him talk to bus drivers when he gets on a school bus, talking to teachers. Like he just finished summer school. He had I think 2 or 3 weeks of summer school. New teacher, new person, new kids in class, and he gets on the bus in the morning and he comes off the bus in the afternoon. And for 8 hours, he's somewhere. He's doing something. He's obviously he's being assisted, and they get him from the bus to the class and back, and give him back those. But he has autonomy for 8 hours, and he is interacting with people he doesn't know. He doesn't, and I feel that is necessary, and he needs to learn to do that. And this is not, we've been doing summer school. It's been recommended by the system, by the education system here in the state, and pretty much every summer. And he's been doing that, and also he's done kindergarten. He did the first grade twice, because they want. He's very small, like for his age. He's like myself. I was always the shortest kid in class, and so he's kind of following the same genetic path. And so they wanted to keep him back a little bit so that he would reach, catch up with the rest of these peers, because a lot of his peers were bigger and taller, and so he stayed in the first grade twice, and then now he just finished the second grade. He's moving on to the third grade. Step by step, little by little, he's getting through high school program. He's not meeting a lot of the goals that they want for him. They are doing speech therapy and occupational therapy in school. It's provided by the school. So we're limiting to just that, because we don't want to do anything extra. We want to, make sure that he comes home and can decompress. And he really enjoys that decompression. When he comes back from school, he knows, he just changes real quick. He gets his iPads, and he's in his world for the rest of the day and nobody's bothering him. So he really enjoys that routine, and he doesn't object going to school. He's okay with that and comes back and has his decompression. And I feel like the way that we have it, the system that we have with him is very it's stable. It's not making him, if it was unstable, he would have some sort of regression, some sort of problems. But he's making, adjusting to what it is, and he's doing the best he can. And I feel like it's, that's our path. That's how we're doing it.
That's awesome. I have an additional question just to follow up on that. So does he use any alternative forms of communication other than echolalia?
We have considered it, but we decided against it. I felt that giving him alternatives may also lower his motivation to seek the verbal path. I felt that, and he was he didn't accept it. Like we tried it, it didn't stick. He didn't. It wasn't like, okay, this is what I was looking for, I can just follow this path. It was not really giving us what we wanted. And on top of that, I felt that, if we enforced it, if we made him do it, and he would probably, say, okay, like, it's fine, I'll do it. But I just felt that it would take away from his motivation to seek the verbal path, because I feel like, at the end of the day, if we can get him to be even limitedly verbal so he can express, it would be more beneficial than him walking around with an iPad or some sort of board that he can show people. Because I feel like it would be more, it would take away from his autonomy, from his experience. And, I feel like, and I believe that he does have the verbal in him. It's just the matter of setting up the environment where he wants to get there. And so no, we right now we're not doing it, but he's surprising us with some of the verbal stuff. Like, for example, yesterday we were landing on an airplane, and as it was landing, obviously when it hit the ground, it was shaking. And he was so excited with the fact that it was the altitude was dropping, because he likes the feeling and he was by the window, and he was like, oh, it's shaking. So it was firstly, like, it was one of the instances where we were like, okay, this is functional. He's connecting his experience, and he's communicating what he's feeling, and it's already a step in the right direction. And that gives, like, any evidence of that gives me more and more hope that there is, the connection, that he's able to produce the words, he's able to understand what they mean, and now he just needs to put it together. And so we're hoping that we're going to get there. And slowly, it's just there's some evidence that it's happening.
Yeah, that's so cool. I was just curious. That's cool.
Yeah, I watched a video on the AAC, and we had a little bit of a discussion and comments. I remember that as well.
Do you experience people telling you that they know more about what your child needs than you do? And how does that make you feel, or what is your response to that?
No, people, I think it's our society is very becoming more and more PC, political correctness, and people afraid to hurt your feelings, in a sense that. And I feel that a lot of the professionals that we work with a speech therapist and occupational therapist at school, and we have our IEP meetings every year. We have them, and they basically just tell us what they observe. They take in our feedback on what they observe, to kind of complement what they're seeing and how it works, because we see him more than they do, and we can contribute. And but nobody really makes me feel that, like, that they're telling me that they know more about my child than I do. And I would I wouldn't think it's true, even if they did, because they can think what they want, but it's very difficult for them to know my child better because they don't see him as much as I do. They don't know him as much as I do. And yeah. So no, it's everybody's very polite. Everybody's very. We had when we did VPK, we had a overqualified person that took care of him, and she was very opinionated, and it caused traction, it caused friction. But even my child, he felt it. He felt the tension. He felt he did not like her. He did not want to go. He didn't. Luckily, she didn't. She did only VPK, and then once we moved past the VPK, he was all the other teachers that he had were understanding and were nicer, and he didn't have any issues with anybody else. So I feel it's not right to express that. It's just I feel it's too I don't know what the word is. Too arrogant. I think that's the word. They're arrogant to feel that because a person is like to make a statement that you know somebody better than their family. It's too arrogant, and I don't think it's very professional either.
I'm really glad that that's been your experience because a lot of people I've talked to, they've had professionals and just like random people kind of assert that they know better about their kids. And so I'm glad that for the most part, that hasn't been your experience.
Yeah, the people. A lot of times when I tell my people, my coworkers, my friends, when I told them that my child is special needs, a lot of them try to be optimistic and they say, hey, it's okay. We know everybody knows someone who has similar issue. But I don't think it's true. I think a lot of times they just want to relate to what you're going through. And so I just understand that they're just trying to be supportive, even if if they're making things up or trying to, just a little white lie here and there to make me feel better. But I don't really need to feel better. I know how I feel and it's fine. So, but being respectful to them, I just let them have their moment, and they just say whatever they need to say, and just say, yeah, okay, well, we're doing what we can, and it's okay, but they just trying to be supportive. And I just try to look at the positive in my interactions with people, but none of them really understand what it is to walk in my shoes, to interact, and face certain challenges and things on a daily basis. So like they can't possibly know that, and so I understand that as well. So maybe it's maybe it's my nature because I've always been interested in, and I think it's because I've always found myself to be different. I always wanted to know why people do what they do. Why do they react the way they react? And this forever pursuit to figure out why are people doing the things they're doing. It's like it's always like it was. I gravitated towards psychology, but when I first picked this is my second degree. I have a degree in computer science. For financial reasons, computer science was my other passion, and not necessarily I did it just for the money because I had the passion in computers, but I was at I had to make a choice to either the computers or the psychology, and at the time, it was early 2000s, and it was the IT boom, and it just felt that this was the right option for me at the time, and it was. And but later, I still had to come back and do some psychology to figure out to fulfill my passion a little bit. And I've considered graduate to follow the ABA path for graduate, but I'm still considering. I don't know if I will do it because I just don't see the benefit of continuing to study because I feel like I've got the foundation, and graduate studies are preparing me for being BCBA. And being BCBA, I don't think, for ethical reasons, I wouldn't want to be BCBA because I wouldn't want to subject the kids, because I know once you're in the system, you have to do what the system tells you. And I disagree with the system as it is. And I don't think single-handedly I could change the system. So it feels kind of like a dead end and unnecessary further education. Although I may learn something new, I mean, I may further my education, but I just at this point I'm not convinced yet.
It'll be really cool though, either way.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. That was my original goal, to get to the BCBA level, to fully understand the system, fully understand what's going on, and be able to, like I felt that I would have the necessary skills and experience and to best assist my child. And but unfortunately, reading through many in the course of my bachelor degree, I have read many studies, and there's always, like, I've always found flaws in all the studies. Every study that I read, there would always be a limitation section, and the limitation section they would say, well, we only pick kids from like the rich neighborhood, and that, because of this, we obviously got good results, but those good results still could be considered. And I was like, well, why can't you just get more kids from different cross sections? Or it would be, oh, we had to drop some kids because they didn't quite fit our mold, and that gives you like, okay, well, then it's not objective, then you're being biased in your conclusions. But later I understood that a lot of this is driven by the system wants you to produce the results that are beneficial to the system. Otherwise you don't get the publicity, you don't get the recognition, you don't get anywhere. And there were instances where results were objective, but they didn't get the publicity. They were sidelined, and they were never considered. And that was, to me, that breaks the integrity of the whole process. You're not supposed to do that. And this dishonesty is just like, the more I read, the more I felt it, and I just couldn't. I just, for me, ethically, I just couldn't continue in this. And I felt that if I continue in this and I do research and I remain objective, I felt that it would be a career suicide for me.
Yeah.
And I just, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Knowing where it leads, I think, that's not where I want to go. And unfortunately, that's the situation as of right now. Maybe it changes in the future, maybe, but it hasn't changed in the last 50 years. So what are the chances that it might?
Yeah.
I think it's been railroaded in that direction.
What do you think about the conversation around who gets to speak or advocate for non-speaking autistic people?
I feel like non-speaking autistics need to communicate for themselves. There are ways. There are, they can find ways. There are many different ways that the non-speaking autistics could communicate. Whether it's AAC, if that's the path they chose, whether it's limited verbal, whether it's body language, because parents and caregivers are not always 100% aware. I mean, the logical choice, obviously, the caregivers that need to communicate for for the child, but I feel like it takes away from the nonverbal person. It takes it puts them in a back, and everybody's speaking for them, and I don't think it's right. I think the only person that knows best is that person themselves. So they need to find some way to express, and some way. And if it's completely impossible, then I think the second best choices would be the caregivers. They need to speak for what they are. Like, I think they know the person best, but not every caregiver is a good caregiver. I've noticed that a lot of some caregivers are not fully invested. There are different types of caregivers, and some caregivers get overwhelmed with how much work it takes to give care to the person with special needs, and a lot of times it could be disastrous for the relationship and for them. And in my view, a lot of caregivers that get overwhelmed with what it takes and who are not willing to sacrifice their time and effort to care, they're the ones that bring their kids to the ABA centers, and they feel like they cannot be bothered. Like, here's my kid, fix him, I'll come back and pick him up later, because I have my life to live. I don't want to deal with this. And on one side, I don't, like, I don't know if you can blame the person, because obviously, they didn't anticipate this. It kind of happened. But on the other side, it's like, okay, well, you have to consider all possible options. It could have happened. So, like you decided to engage and to have a child. Okay, you've been, you had that. You got to see positive in it. You have to figure out how to deal with it. You have to do at least minimum, to be there for your child. Just this. But everybody's different. Everybody have their lives. Only also, a lot of times, because I truly believe that autism is genetic, and a lot of times one or both parents could also be on the spectrum. I feel that they're the best people to do this, because they have genetic connection, they understand the condition, because they probably are also there, but their challenges could get in the way of providing the care. So it's hard to judge anybody, but a parent has to be a parent, and if you are not willing to be a parent, then maybe being a parent is not for you.
Mhm.
So it's a decision that everybody needs to kind of make before they have children, and be ready for anything that comes their way.
And did you have any other thoughts that you'd like to share?
My journey with ABA has been a bumpy one. I got into it believing that it was abuse and it was bad, and over the time, as I understood how it works, I still feel that the ABA is unethical, because the best way I could describe it is that ABA is like, right now I work in IT. I do information security. So I hack systems. I try to misuse systems, or bypass certain things that were meant to be a certain way in a different way. And ABA, in my view, is also like biological hacking. It's hacking of behavior, and it would implementing ABA on a person. It bypasses their consent. It bypasses their understanding of what it is that is required of them. You're hacking, and you're misusing the natural process of behavior acquisition and behavior learning of why they do the things they do. You don't explain, and sometimes because you can, and sometimes because you just don't care to explain. You just want the results now. You want it implemented, and you want it to. So I was thinking about that concept earlier, and I was thinking, like, for example, if you were to make a bank transfer, and you have two options. You could do it the ethical way by just making a bank transfer, or you could misuse the system and do it a hacker way. And by doing that, you're breaking the law and you're achieving the same results. Why would you do the hacker way if you can do it the natural way? So like the same way, implementing ABA on a person is kind of like this hacker way. Like you're bypassing the normal processes. Like, why would you do that? It's effective and it works and it's used quite often, but it's just not right to do that if you have other options. Um, and so like there's this ethical thing, but there are circumstances where the situation of a person is so drastic that you need to intervene before they hurt themselves, or before they hurt somebody else, or before they completely explode and destroy the house that they live in. You need to intervene and stop it, so for the safety of the person. And those are extremes that where usage of ABA is justified by, but implementing ABA on a person without any of the extremes, just simply doing the early intervention, just putting them in and just subjecting them to day in, day out behavior modification without them understanding why they do the things they do and how they do the things. It's just inhumane, and it's not right, and it shouldn't be done unless there's a circumstances where it's required. I feel that the ABA is good if it's used correctly, and I think the parents who are autistic or who are caring for an autistic child would be better off understanding how it works to be more effective. I feel like it would release the anxiety that they have with having to deal with certain challenges. They would be more equipped with dealing with difficult situations and be able to kind of engage and know what to do and not to get overwhelmed and have problems. Like also I think if they were more equipped, it would maybe not get situations to the extremes, so that they would have to engage the ABA centers and ABA clinicians to work with the child. And I found it to be very helpful for me personally, because I have had some situations at work where things would happen and I wouldn't know what caused it or why. So being able to have the knowledge of the ABA allowed me to kind of determine, okay, where's the problem, and fix it. So I stabilized some of the things, some of my relationships, personal relationships and work relationships. So for me, being as an autistic, it helped a lot. And I feel that a lot of the autistics need to really look into it. And I think it would help them, do daily things and interact with other people a little bit more effectively. So there's uses for it. It's just not a lot of people. A lot of people get discouraged because they see the overwhelming negativity from autistic community with regard to ABA, and they immediately turned off and they say, okay, I'm not touching that with a stick, and and some people like myself, I was like, okay, well, if people tell me not to touch it, I'm gonna touch it. Because the curiosity just took over. Plus, I figured, and hey, it can't hurt. I need to understand it better. A lot of times, I like, it's just, when people tell me, okay, don't do this, I want to know why not do this. I
Yeah.
need to understand it. I need to learn more about it. I need to figure out ins and outs and see, is it really what they think it is? Because a lot of times people just make judgments like that based on somebody said something, or I heard something somewhere, or and a lot of times the videos on autism are, it's either okay, it's really really good, or it's really really bad. There's no in between. There's no, nobody's in the center kind of saying like, well, why is it really bad, or why is it really good? Can we find middle ground to kind of like, have an objective view on this thing, but a lot of people just easily just sway one way or the other and kind of divide into the two camps. I just feel like, hey, we could find common ground. We can find some sort of compromise and meet in the middle and just see what is good, what is bad, why is it bad, why is it good. Let's get to the bottom of this. And it helps me, and I feel like it would help many people if they looked into it. Even not necessarily autistic, just neurotypical people, I think, would benefit from it as well. A lot of times people make, say things or do things, and then they do, things just explode on them, and they just don't know why, what's happening, like why, what did I say, why did it affect somebody in this way? And it's all there. It's like a manual that but it's just there, and people just don't always, know that it's there. And if
Yeah.
they did, I think it would help to everybody.
Thank you so much for agreeing to this and sharing all of your thoughts and insight. And
Sure.
thanks